Ecuador's President Guillermo Lasso deployed more than 1,000 police and military personnel to the city of Guayaquil amid a spate of violent deaths. The World Health Organization chief has stressed that one person dies from COVID-19 every 12 seconds, but the planet still has a chance to end the global health emergency this year. Soldiers in Burkina Faso led a coup on Monday, ousting President W.H.O and dissolving the government. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, in this RT News. We begin this news brief in Ecuador, where President Guillermo Lasso ordered more than 1,000 police and military personnel to patrol the city of Guayaquil. In the country's southwest, amid a spate of violent deaths, the government says are connected to the fight against the drug trade. The increase in violent crimes has left about 70 people dead in 3 weeks and resulted in the removal of police commander. President Lasso said the military has been deployed to strengthen control and prevent the entry of drugs from the north, that is Colombia, or weapons from the south, that is Peru. He blamed the recent surge in violence on the settling of scores between criminal gangs. Meanwhile, social and political movements have denounced the escalating militarization of the country and called for government policy that tackles the roots of crime, including growing inequality. And the Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel held a phone call with his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin on Monday as the two leaders discussed their strategic partnership and the further coordination between their countries. The Cuban president said the conversation had been friendly and fruitful on Twitter, adding that the two had exchanged views on their excellent relations and future links in different spheres, as well as on the current international situation. Díaz-Canel also thanked his Russian counterpart for the humanitarian aid supply to fight COVID-19, which was decisive in confronting the peak of the pandemic. According to the Kremlin, the two leaders had an in-depth exchange of opinions in bilateral cooperation in trade, the economy, and investment. Newly re-elected Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Motley, announced major changes to her new cabinet this Monday, formed of 20 ministers. Not only has the cabinet been reduced, but the Barbadian Prime Minister declared a Deputy Prime Minister as well as 4 senior ministers responsible for infrastructure, social and environmental policy, the productive sectors and governance. Addressing the nation on Monday evening, Motley stated that she will be retaining responsibility as Minister of Finance and Economic Affairs, with responsibility for culture, security, public service, CARICOM and the development commissions. In addition to the announcement of her cabinet, the Prime Minister made a proposal which will require a constitutional amendment to allow a 18-year-old to serve as senator, if it is accepted. Motley was sworn in for a second term last Thursday, following her Barbados Labour Party's second landslide election victory, taking all the 30 seats in the parliament. The National Police Force of Honduras reiterated their support for constitutional president-elect Xiomara Castro after the institutional crisis sparked in Congress. The National Police issued an official statement recalling that they are a subordinate security body under the authority of the president elected by popular vote. In accordance with the Honduran Constitution, the police force is a professional and apolitical institution with a purely civilian nature, responsible for the preservation of public order. In this sense, the force expressed its support to the president-elect and called on all the other public forces to defend the will of the population, as expressed in the last November's elections. And we continue in Honduras, where in the midst of a political crisis which led to the election of 2 new boards of directors of the National Congress, the Council of Private Enterprise has called on the political forces in dispute to seek a solution through dialogue. The Council warned that the credibility of the political elite at a national and international level was deteriorating due to the political crisis stemming from a split in the Liberty and Refundation Party. It called for unity as the only way for the country to overcome the crisis. The spirit of hope that the Honduran population has experienced since the November 28th election, with the landslide presidential victory of Xiomara Castro, has turned into discontent and repudiation at the acts of certain politicians, just a few days before her inauguration as president. Now we address other topics. In Peru, the president of the Spanish company Repsol admitted to an error of perception regarding the magnitude of the oil spill along the country's coast on January 15th, stating that the company only noticed the impact of the environmental disaster the day after the event. During a televised interview, Repsol President Jaime Fernandez stated it was not until the following day that it was noticed that the spill was spreading along with the sea currents. According to the Peruvian Environmental Evaluation and Control Agency, the extension of the affected area on beaches and coastline is 180 hectares, and into the sea it is 713 hectares. Initially, Repsol stated that it was only a spill of 7 gallons of oil. The Peruvian government is demanding compensation to finance the cleanup and address the environmental impacts. And we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. The World Health Organization chief has stressed that one person dies from COVID-19 every 12 seconds, but the planet still has the chance to end the global health emergency this year.
All of these strategies and tools in a comprehensive way, we can end the acute phase of the pandemic this year. We can end COVID-19 as a global health emergency, and we can do it this year. On average, last week, 100 cases were reported every 3 seconds. And somebody lost their life to COVID-19 every 12 seconds. Since Omicron was first identified just 9 weeks ago, more than 80 million cases have been reported to W.H.O. More than were reported in the whole of 2020. Vaccines alone are not the golden ticket out of this pandemic. But there is no path out unless we achieve our shared target of vaccinating 70% of the population of every country by the middle of this year.
And Peru has begun vaccinating children aged 5 to 11 against COVID-19. The first group of children, to get vaccinated are those who suffer from oncological diseases, Down syndromes, rare diseases, mental and neurodevelopmental disorders, or are awaiting or have received organ transplants. On Friday, 996,000 doses of vaccines from the U.S. laboratory Pfizer arrived in Lima to be administered to children. Peru has 4 million children in this age group, according to official figures. The vaccination campaign began in February 2021. More than 80% of the population over the age of 12 has already been vaccinated, while almost 7 million have received a booster dose, according to the Health Ministry. And Cuba has surpassed 4 million citizens vaccinated with a booster dose against COVID-19, maintaining its leading position in the world in terms of vaccination against the virus and using its own vaccines. So far, Cuba has applied over 33 million doses using its own W.H.O, Sabrana Plus, and Abdala shots, of which over 4.5 million correspond to the booster doses. The Ministry of Public Health also reported that at least one first dose was administered to over 10.5 million, and more than 9.3 million are fully vaccinated.
For me, the vaccine has been a blessing because I got vaccinated already. I have never had a reaction. I have vaccinated my mother, who is 91 years old, my husband, who is 72 years old, my grandchildren, who are 6 and 12 years old, and none of them have had any reaction at all.
And nearly 10 million students returned to full-time in-person classes on Monday in Colombia, after nearly 2 years of disrupted attendance due to COVID-19 restrictions. The COVID-19 vaccine is not a prerequisite for students to return to school in the country, but the government has promoted vaccination by setting up immunization centers at school entrances. Children must have permission from their parents to be vaccinated. The return to full-time in-person classrooms took place in 46 parts of the country. 17 other zones began their return last week, and it's estimated that by January 31st, the remaining schools will do the same. And also, schools in India's financial hub Mumbai reopened as the country battles a surge in COVID-19 infections. Schools in districts with lower levels of infections in India's richest state, Maharashtra, including the financial capital Mumbai, welcomed back students for in-person classes on Monday after they were shut when a new surge in coronavirus infections swept the country. The move has been welcomed by the students, eager to be back in face-to-face classes.
And all that, and then the school was reopened from 4th of November, and then again shut down, and then again reopening. So it's altogether a pleasure for all of us to see the entire school running properly with 100% staff and the students.
I'm happy because we are having offline, so it's a good experience to listen to teacher when she is in front of you, and you are able to understand what she is teaching. In online classes we have the network issues and all, so it's quite hard to understand the topic and clear the concepts.
On Monday, the United Kingdom's High Court decided to allow Julian Assange to appeal to the Supreme Court in this fight against extradition to the United States. The ruling follows a December decision by the same court to greenlight the U.S. appeal to extradite Assange, overturning an earlier decision that the Australian journalist could not be extradited to the U.S. due to his mental health and suicide risk. U.S. authorities have charged the 50-year-old under the Espionage Act for his role in publishing thousands of classified military and diplomatic cables in 2010. If convicted, Assange faces up to 175 years in prison in a country that has already plotted his assassination. The United States and the United Kingdom withdrew diplomatic personnel and their families from Ukraine under the pretext of an imminent invasion by Russia. The move is part of the recent campaign by the Western powers to create what Russia has denounced as a facade crisis, and follows talks between U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov to de-escalate the tensions in the region. The U.S. State Department told the dependents of staffers at the U.S. Embassy in Kiev that they must leave the country. It also said that non-essential embassy staff could leave Ukraine at government expense, as the false creation of a Russian threat shows no signs of dying down. Moscow has repeatedly denied any invasion plan against Ukraine. And a Ukrainian Foreign Ministry spokesperson said it was premature of the United States to evacuate the families of its diplomatic staff in Kiev due to fears of a supposed Russian invasion.
Respecting the right of foreign states to ensure the security of their diplomatic missions, we consider such a step by the American side premature and a display of excessive caution. In fact, there have been no radical changes in the security situation recently. The threat of new waves of Russian aggression has remained constant since 2014, and the accumulation of Russian troops near the state border began in April last year.
And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Soldiers in Burkina Faso on Monday announced on state television that they have seized power, asking President W.H.O suspending the constitution, dissolving the government and the National Assembly, and closing the country's borders. A junior officer announcing the move, reading from a statement signed by Lieutenant Colonel Paul-Henri Zandaogo Damina, said the new patriotic movement for preservation and restoration will re-establish constitutional order within a reasonable time, also saying that a nationwide nightly curfew will be enforced. Earlier on Monday, African and Western powers denounced what they called an attempted coup, and the European Union demanded the immediate release of the president. On Sunday, soldiers rose up at several army bases across Burkina Faso, which has been fighting an insurgency since 2015. They demanded the removal of military top brass and more resources to fight insurgents, but made no mention to seeking Kabore's ouster. The president, in power since 2015 and re-elected in 2020, has faced rising public anger about the failure to stop the bloodshed in the poor, landlocked country.
In view of the continuous deterioration of the security situation which threatens the very foundations of our nation, the manifest inability of Mr. Roch-Marc Christian Kabore to unite the Burkinabes to deal effectively with the situation, and following the exasperation of the various social strata of the nation, the Patriotic Movement for Safeguarding and Restoration, MPSR, has decided to assume its responsibilities before history, the national and international community. The MPSR would like to stress that the operations were conducted without bloodshed and without any physical violence to the arrested persons who are being held in a safe place with respect to their dignity.
United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres condemned the military takeover in Burkina Faso and urged the coup leaders to lay down their arms.
A statement on the situation in Burkina Faso. The Secretary General is following developments in Burkina Faso with deep concern. He's particularly worried about the whereabouts and safety of President Roch-Marc Christian Kabore, as well as the worsening security situation following the coup carried out on January 23rd by sections of the armed forces. The Secretary General strongly condemns any attempted takeover of government by the force of arms. He calls on the coup leaders to lay down their arms and to ensure the protection of the physical integrity of the president and of the institutions of Burkina Faso.
Iran said on Monday it will consider direct talks with the United States during ongoing negotiations in Vienna, if that is required for a good agreement to salvage the 2015 nuclear deal. The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, agreed by Iran, the US, China, Russia, Britain, France and Germany, offered to Iran sanctions relief in exchange for curbs on its nuclear program, but has been in tatters since the US unilaterally withdrew in 2018 under then-President Donald Trump and reimposed economic sanctions, prompting Tehran to begin rolling back its commitments. Talks aimed at restoring the deal started last year in Vienna between Iran and the countries still part of the accord. The U.S. has been taking part indirectly in negotiations, but the Iranian foreign minister said the U.S. side seems to be seeking some level of direct talks, a possibility to which Iran is open.
It is sending messages in different ways that it seeks a level of direct talks with Iran. Our direct talks are with P4+1. Our direct talks are with P4+1, and our indirect negotiations with the U.S. currently are through non-papers via Enrique Mora and one or two other countries present at Vienna talks. Iran is not currently talking with the U.S. directly, but if during the negotiation process we get to a point that reaching a good agreement with solid guarantees requires a level of talks with the U.S., we will not ignore that in our work schedule.
Several Libyan presidential candidates held a forum meeting in Tripoli on Monday, calling for delayed elections to be held. The country failed to hold its first presidential election as planned in December, a major blow to international efforts to end a decade of chaos in the oil-rich Mediterranean country following the 2011 NATO-led military invasion and assassination of leader Muammar Gaddafi. The postponement of the December 24th vote has opened up uncertainty over what comes next in the tenuous peace process, raising worries Libya could slide into a new round of violence after more than a year of relative calm. Presidential candidates presented an initiative to the United Nations missions in the country last Thursday with the aim of overcoming the obstacles facing the political process. And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesureenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For Telesur English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.